You know what's interesting about people? We don't always remember the dates. We don't always remember the gifts. We don't always remember the exact words someone said to us. But what we never forget, what is seared into our memory, is how someone made us feel. And for women, there are certain moments, certain actions, certain gestures that leave an imprint so deep they never fade. Think about it. You can forget 100 faces in a crowd, but there's always that one person you can't erase from your mind. Not because they were perfect, not because they were flawless, but because of the way they showed up, the way they carried themselves, the way they treated you. And here's the truth most people overlook. Women don't remember the man who had the flashiest words, the fanciest things, or the loudest presence. They remember the man who did the things most men forget to do. See, we live in a world where it's easy to talk, easy to impress for a moment, easy to make a temporary impact. But lasting impact? That's rare. And when someone makes a woman feel truly seen, respected, valued, protected, she carries that memory with her for life. So ask yourself this, what is it that makes someone unforgettable? What is it that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary? Because when a woman says, "I'll never forget him," she isn't talking about the one who tried to impress her for a night. She's talking about the one whose actions, whose presence, whose character etched themselves into her heart. And today, we're going to break this down. We're going to talk about the 6 things that make a man unforgettable. Not because he forced himself into memory, but because his behavior, his integrity, his way of showing up made it impossible to forget. People often believe that the secret to leaving a lasting impression is through grand gestures, expensive gifts, or carefully chosen words. But here's the truth. None of that matters if there is no consistency behind it. Words without action dissolve like smoke. They sound good in the moment. They might even create excitement, but they vanish just as quickly. What lingers, what truly embeds itself in memory, is the quiet and steady rhythm of someone who shows up again and again, not because they have to, but because it's who they are. Consistency is the difference between someone being remembered for a fleeting season and someone being remembered for a lifetime. When you think about the people who impacted your life, what do you recall? It's not the one-time act of kindness or the dramatic promise whispered in a heated moment. It's the ones who kept showing up, who made you feel you could rely on them when everything else was uncertain. Women in particular never forget this quality because consistency equals safety. It signals dependability, trustworthiness, and stability in a world where those things are often hard to find. A man who says he cares but disappears when he's needed most, leaves nothing behind but disappointment. A man who doesn't always speak the loudest, but consistently acts with integrity, leaves a permanent mark. There's a saying, don't tell me who you are, show me. This applies here more than anywhere else. It is easy to tell someone, I'll always be there for you, but those words lose weight if the phone rings and you don't answer, if challenges arise and you vanish. On the other hand, even a man who never promises anything but always quietly does what he says he will, he's remembered. His reliability becomes a story told long after he leaves. Women don't forget the man who followed through, who kept his word not just once, not just twice, but repeatedly, until it became part of who he was. Consistency isn't glamorous. It doesn't always get applause. In fact, it often goes unnoticed in the moment, because it's not dramatic or flashy. But with time, it builds the strongest memory. Imagine 2 men. One makes bold promises, creates excitement, maybe even impresses at first. The other doesn't boast, doesn't exaggerate. He simply does what he says he will. Years later, when asked who truly mattered, who truly impacted her, it's the second man who comes to mind. Why? Because his consistency built trust brick by brick until it became unshakable. The power of consistency is that it creates safety without having to announce it. A woman who experiences this knows she can lean on that presence without fear of disappointment. It's not about being perfect, it's about being steady. Life is unpredictable, storms come, difficulties arise, and in those moments words fall apart. What remains is the man who shows up even in silence, even without fanfare, even when it's inconvenient. That reliability is unforgettable. There's also something deeper here. Consistency is not just about how you treat her, it's about who you are when no one is watching. Women notice more than most men think. They see how you treat others, how you handle your commitments, how you carry yourself. When your actions match your words, not just with her, but in every area of life, that's when consistency becomes character. And character is what stays etched in memory forever. Think of it like this. Anyone can sprint for a short distance. Anyone can show up once, twice, maybe even a handful of times. But consistency is about endurance. It's about running the marathon, not the sprint. A man who stays the course proves not only his dedication, but also his strength of character. That's why women never forget it. It's rare. So many people start strong and fade away, but the one who keeps going, who keeps showing up, stands apart. Let's not confuse consistency with perfection. Perfection is impossible, and trying to appear flawless only breeds distrust. What matters is the pattern, the reliability, the effort that repeats itself over time. Even small acts, when done consistently, leave the deepest impression. Remembering details, being there during difficult days, honoring promises no matter how small, these are the things that linger long after words are forgotten. A man who embodies consistency doesn't need to keep convincing anyone of his value. His actions speak louder than his declarations. And that's the man women never forget. The one who didn't just talk about what he would do, but the one who showed it repeatedly until his presence became a source of strength. He is remembered not because of dramatic highs or lows, but because he created a steady rhythm of trust, stability, and truth. So if you want to know why consistency is unforgettable, it's because it is proof of who someone really is. Anyone can pretend for a little while, anyone can say the right thing in the right moment, but not everyone can keep showing up, keep following through, keep aligning words with actions day after day. That is what builds unshakable trust. That is what carves a permanent memory. And that is why, long after the noise fades, a woman will always remember the man who didn't just speak, but the one who consistently showed up. There is a difference between protecting someone and trying to control them. Too often people confuse the two, thinking that keeping someone safe means telling them what to do, where to go, and how to live. But real protection doesn't cage anyone in. Real protection creates space where the other person feels free, secure, and unafraid. It isn't about dominance. It isn't about power. It's about presence. And that kind of protection is unforgettable.
Women never forget a man who made them feel safe without making them feel small. Think about that for a moment. Safety is not just about standing in front of danger. It's about being the kind of person who reduces stress instead of adding to it. It's about creating an atmosphere where she knows she can breathe, where she doesn't have to look over her shoulder emotionally or physically. Safety is about knowing someone has your back, not because they demand control over your choices, but because they respect and support your right to live them.
When we talk about protection, many people immediately picture physical strength, someone stepping into a fight, someone defending against a threat. And while that matters, it's only one layer. The deeper kind of protection is emotional. It's psychological. It's spiritual. It's knowing that when you're vulnerable, you won't be judged, mocked, or manipulated. It's knowing that when you speak, your words will be held with care. It's knowing that when life becomes overwhelming, you have a steady presence beside you, not someone who makes the storm worse. A man who protects without controlling doesn't strip away freedom. He reinforces it. He creates a foundation strong enough for her to stand taller. That doesn't mean he fights all her battles for her, and it doesn't mean he tells her how to fight them either. It means he stands beside her, ready to support if needed, but never stealing the wheel out of her hands. That balance is powerful because it says, I respect your strength, but I'll never let you feel alone. Think about how rare that is. So many confuse control with care. They believe that by deciding for someone else, by limiting their freedom, they are keeping them safe. But in truth, control is fear disguised as love. It says, I don't trust you to navigate your own path, so I will force you into mine. That doesn't create safety, it creates resentment. Protection, on the other hand, is strength disguised as love. It says, I trust you to walk your path, and I'll be here to guard you if danger comes. A woman never forgets the man who created that environment for her. The man who understood that his role was not to silence her, but to support her. The man who recognized that true protection is quiet and steady, not loud and possessive. She remembers the feeling of peace that washed over her in his presence. She remembers the freedom to be herself without fear of being attacked or diminished. This kind of protection also shows in the small details, the everyday interactions that may seem minor, but build a lasting memory. It's the way he defends her when she isn't in the room, refusing to let anyone speak against her character. It's the way he steps in when disrespect crosses the line, not for control, but to make clear that her dignity is non-negotiable. It's the way he notices when she's overwhelmed and provides relief without turning it into a spectacle. These moments matter because they speak louder than words. They say, you are safe here. And here's something powerful. Women don't forget safety because it is so rare. Too many men are sources of chaos rather than calm. Too many create storms instead of providing shelter. So when a woman encounters someone who is different, someone who doesn't add to the noise but instead brings peace, she never forgets it. It becomes a reference point in her memory, a standard by which she measures others. Protection is not about control, because control is rooted in insecurity. The man who needs to control doesn't trust himself enough to let her be free. The man who truly protects has no fear of her independence. He admires it, he respects it. He doesn't feel smaller because of her strength. He feels stronger standing beside it. That confidence radiates and that energy is what lingers. Safety is not just the absence of danger. It is the presence of stability. It is the reassurance that no matter how unpredictable the world becomes, this person is steady, consistent, and reliable. That steadiness is a shield all on its own. It means she doesn't have to walk into every room on high alert because she knows if something happens, she won't face it alone. And more importantly, she knows he won't try to diminish her voice or her choices in the name of protection. Think about the weight of that memory. When a woman looks back years later, she may forget the words that were said. She may forget the day-to-day conversations, but she will never forget the man who gave her the gift of safety without conditions. That memory doesn't fade because it is tied to one of the deepest human needs, the need to feel secure. So when we say that women never forget a man who protects without controlling, what we are really saying is this. They never forget the man who allowed them to stand in their power while making sure they were never left exposed. They never forget the man who understood that strength is not about domination, but about creating peace. And they never forget the man who proved that true protection is not about holding someone back. It's about standing beside them so they can move forward without fear. One of the greatest tests of a man's character is how he responds to a woman's independence. Does he celebrate it, or does he shrink in the face of it? Does he see her strength as something that adds value to both their lives, or does he see it as a threat to his own sense of importance? A woman never forgets the man who admired her independence, who respected her ability to stand on her own 2 feet, and who supported her without trying to control or diminish her. That kind of respect is rare, and because it is rare, it becomes unforgettable. Many people confuse respect with tolerance. They think, I allow her to do her own thing, isn't that enough? But respect isn't passive. Respect is active. It's not about simply letting her exist. It's about acknowledging, appreciating, and uplifting her individuality. It's about recognizing that she has her own vision, her own goals, her own dreams that may not always revolve around you. And instead of feeling insecure about that, it means cheering her on, standing behind her, and sometimes even stepping aside to give her space to grow. A man who respects a woman's independence understands that her strength does not subtract from his, it multiplies it. When she is thriving, he is thriving too, because strength shared is always greater than strength divided. He doesn't feel smaller when she shines. He feels proud that he gets to witness her shine. He doesn't try to dim her light so his can look brighter. Instead, he fuels her fire, knowing that together, the flame burns higher. That mindset is what leaves a permanent mark on her memory, because it is not common to find. There are men who fear strong women because they confuse dominance with leadership. They believe that in order to lead, they must control, and in order to feel significant, they must be needed. But here's the truth. Needing someone to be weak so you can feel strong is not strength, it's weakness. A truly strong man doesn't need to shrink anyone else to feel secure. He doesn't measure his worth by how much control he has, but by how much respect he gives. That respect builds trust, and trust is something that stays etched in the heart long after everything else fades. Think about the difference between a man who belittles her ambitions and a man who encourages them. One makes her feel as though she must choose between love and growth. The other makes her feel as though she can have both, without apology. A woman never forgets the man who stood in her corner, who looked at her and said, "Go after it. I believe in you." That kind of support echoes because it is a partnership instead of a prison. Respecting independence also means understanding boundaries. It's knowing when to step in and when to step back. It's about trusting her decisions, even if they aren't the ones you would make. It's about recognizing that she has her own wisdom, her own perspective, and her own experiences that guide her choices. And when you respect those choices, even when they don't align perfectly with your own, you are telling her, I see you, I value you, I trust you. That message is unforgettable because it honors her humanity instead of trying to control it. A man who fears a woman's independence often reacts with control, jealousy, or criticism. He may try to clip her wings so she doesn't fly too far, because he believes her growth means losing her. But a man who admires her strength knows the opposite is true. He understands that by giving her space to soar, he isn't losing her. He's deepening the bond, because nothing binds two people stronger than freedom. When someone knows they are free to leave but still choose to stay, that is the most powerful form of loyalty. This kind of respect also creates balance in the relationship. It eliminates the exhausting tug-of-war for power because there is no competition, only collaboration. When she knows her independence is not just tolerated but celebrated, she doesn't have to fight for her place. She doesn't have to shrink herself to fit into his world. Instead, she is free to grow, and that freedom becomes the foundation of deep connection. It's important to understand that admiration is not the same as dependency. Admiring her strength doesn't mean idolizing her or placing her above yourself. It means honoring her qualities while still standing firmly in your own. It means being secure enough in who you are to love her fully for who she is. That security is what women never forget. The rare strength of a man who doesn't just allow independence, but embraces it wholeheartedly. And here's the beauty of it. When a woman feels her independence is respected, she naturally draws closer. She feels safe enough to lean on you, not because she has to, but because she chooses to. She knows she can stand alone, but she also knows she doesn't have to because you've created an environment where she is free, respected, and valued. That choice to lean in becomes the strongest connection of all because it's born out of freedom, not force. So when we say that women never forget a man who respects their independence, it's because respect is love in its purest form. It is love without possession, care without control, and admiration without insecurity. It is rare to find but impossible to forget. A woman carries that memory with her for life. The memory of the man who didn't fear her strength but celebrated it. The man who didn't try to cage her but instead stood beside her and admired the way she soared. And that memory outlasts everything else because it is tied to the most powerful human experience, the freedom to be fully yourself while being fully loved. There is a kind of presence that can change everything, and it doesn't come from saying the perfect words or putting on some grand display. It comes from the ability to listen, not just to hear sounds, but to truly listen with intention, with focus, with heart. We live in a world where almost everyone is distracted, where attention spans are shrinking, where people hear each other but don't really absorb what's being said. And because of that, when someone actually listens fully, deeply, without judgment or interruption, it feels rare, almost sacred. Women never forget a man who gave them that gift of deep presence. Listening is not passive. It's not about standing there in silence while waiting for your turn to talk. It is active. It requires effort. It requires putting your ego aside and making space for someone else's voice to matter. Deep presence is about leaning in, not just with your ears, but with your entire being. It's in the eye contact, the stillness of your body, the way you remember the details later, because you were truly paying attention. That level of presence communicates something powerful. You matter. What you feel matters. What you think matters. And once a woman experiences that, she never forgets it, because so few people offer it. Most people underestimate the impact of being fully heard. Think about how often conversations are filled with interruptions, with people already forming their response while the other is still speaking. Think about how often people dismiss feelings with a quick solution or a casual, "you'll be fine." That isn't listening. That's rushing to fix, to control, or to move on. Deep listening, however, isn't about fixing. It's about witnessing. It's about allowing the other person to express themselves fully, to release their thoughts and emotions into a space that feels safe and respected. That experience is unforgettable because it touches something deeper than the surface. There's a power in remembering the small details too. A woman remembers when she tells you something in passing, and weeks later you bring it up, showing you valued her words enough to hold on to them. That doesn't require grand effort. It requires presence. And presence is one of the greatest forms of love because it cannot be faked. You can fake words, you can fake gestures, but you cannot fake presence. People feel it instantly when you're not really there, when your mind is somewhere else, when your eyes are glazed over. And they also feel it when you are there, fully locked in, undistracted, engaged. That difference is why deep presence stays etched in memory. Being present is also about emotional listening, not just verbal. It's noticing the tone of voice, the pause between words, the change in energy. It's paying attention to what is not being said, just as much as what is spoken. Sometimes, the most important truths are hidden in silence, in hesitation, in the little cracks between sentences. When you pick up on those unspoken cues, when you show empathy, not just for the words, but for the feelings beneath them, you create a connection that goes beyond conversation. You create a bond where she knows she doesn't have to explain everything. You just get it. That is a kind of understanding that never fades. Deep presence requires vulnerability too. It's not one-sided. When you listen fully, you also make space to share honestly when it's your turn. You don't dominate the conversation, but you also don't hide behind a wall of silence. You meet her openness with your own. That exchange creates balance, intimacy, and trust. A woman never forgets the man who didn't just listen to respond, but listened to understand, and then responded with truth, not performance. Another element of presence is patience. In a fast-moving world, many people rush conversations, eager to move on to the next task, the next thought, the next distraction. The patience in listening is a form of respect. It says you are worth my time, you are worth my full attention. And when someone feels that kind of worth, it stays with them. They might not remember every word of the exchange, but they will always remember how valued they felt in that moment. There is also strength in listening without judgment. Too often, people only half listen because they are busy forming opinions, criticizing, or deciding what they think of what's being said. But listening without judgment is different. It allows the speaker to be authentic, to be raw, to be imperfect. That is where the deepest trust is born. A woman will always remember the man who made her feel safe enough to speak her truth without fear of being mocked, dismissed, or criticized. That memory endures because judgment is common, but acceptance is rare. Deep presence isn't about solving every problem. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is to simply sit in silence and listen. Not because you have the answer, but because you are willing to be there in the discomfort with her. That kind of companionship is rare. It communicates. You don't have to go through this alone. That's something she will never forget, because presence in hard times weighs more than 1,000 promises in easy ones. The truth is, presence is the most valuable gift you can give anyone, because it is the one thing you cannot take back. You can always make more money, you can always buy more things, but you cannot create more time. So when you choose to give your time and attention fully, you are giving something irreplaceable. That sacrifice, that intentional choice to be there, stays with someone long after the moment has passed. So why is deep presence unforgettable? Because it is proof that someone truly saw you, truly valued you, truly cared enough to pause their own world and enter yours. And once someone experiences that level of listening, that level of respect, that level of being seen, they never forget it. A woman never forgets the man who didn't just hear her, but who listened deeply, who showed up fully, who made her feel in that moment like she was the only person in the world that mattered. That memory outlasts everything else, because presence is love in its purest form, and love expressed that way never fades. Integrity is one of those qualities that people talk about often, but few actually practice. It's easy to say you have values, it's easy to post about principles, it's easy to claim that you are a certain kind of person, but the real test is whether your actions match your words. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, but always. A woman never forgets a man who has integrity, because it's rare to encounter someone who is the same person in every setting, public, private, with strangers, with friends, with her. That kind of consistency doesn't just earn respect, it builds trust that cannot be shaken. Being consistent in integrity means you don't switch masks, depending on who is watching. Too many people adjust their character like it's a performance. Around friends, they act one way. Around family, they act another. At work, they polish their image. In private, they reveal a completely different side. That lack of alignment eventually shows, because no one can juggle multiple versions of themselves forever. The man who remains the same in all situations, however, that is unforgettable. It's not just his honesty that stands out, it's the stability and peace that come with knowing he is real. Integrity is not about perfection. No one is flawless, we all make mistakes. But integrity means you own those mistakes, you don't hide them, and you don't compromise your values to avoid discomfort. When a man is consistent in his integrity, it creates a sense of security for the people around him. She knows that what he says to her in private is the same truth he lives by in public. She knows that the respect he shows her isn't an act to gain something, it's part of his character. That steadiness is powerful because it tells her, this is who I am, no matter where I am or who I'm with. Think about how rare that is. How many times have you seen someone behave with charm in public only to discover they are completely different behind closed doors? That betrayal leaves a deep scar because it destroys trust, but the opposite is also true. When someone treats the waiter with the same respect they show a boss, when someone honors commitments even when no one would notice if they broke them, when someone keeps promises not because it's convenient but because it's right, that person leaves a lasting impression. Integrity is powerful because it cannot be faked. You can fake charm, you can fake interest, you can even fake kindness for a little while, but over time, inconsistency exposes itself. Integrity, however, is proven day after day, choice after choice, moment after moment. It shows in the details how you speak about people when they aren't in the room, how you handle money that isn't yours, how you respond when no one is watching. A woman never forgets the man who was honest in the small things, because that honesty proves he can be trusted in the big things. Being the same man everywhere also builds credibility. Your words carry weight only when your actions back them up consistently. Anyone can make promises, but not everyone follows through. When your life reflects your words, you don't need to convince people of who you are. They see it. That kind of alignment doesn't just earn memory, it earns respect that lasts a lifetime. Integrity also means refusing to bend to peer pressure or circumstances that push you away from your values. It's easy to be kind when everyone is watching. It's easy to be respectful when it benefits you. But integrity shows when there's no spotlight, when doing the right thing costs you something, when standing by your principles makes you unpopular. That courage to remain authentic is what makes someone unforgettable. Because deep down, everyone admires the strength it takes to be real in a world full of facades. Women remember integrity because it creates safety. Safety in knowing that the man they see is the man he truly is. Safety in knowing that his character won't shift depending on who's in the room. Safety in knowing that his respect isn't conditional. Integrity removes the anxiety of wondering, is this real? Or is it just for show? And that peace is something you cannot put a price on. Consistency and integrity also builds influence without force. People naturally trust and follow those whose actions align with their words. A man with integrity doesn't need to demand respect. It comes to him. He doesn't need to fight for loyalty, it is given freely. And for a woman, that memory lasts because she knows she encountered something rare. A man who could be trusted not just once, not just when it was easy, but always. Over time, consistency and integrity creates a legacy. You may forget the title someone held, the money they made, the things they owned, but you never forget how trustworthy they were, how safe you felt around them, how consistent they remained, even when the world shifted. That's why integrity is unforgettable. It leaves behind a reputation that outlasts words, accomplishments, and appearances. So when we talk about being the same man everywhere, what we really mean is this. Be the man whose character doesn't change with the crowd, whose values don't shift with convenience, whose respect isn't conditional on what he stands to gain. Be the man whose actions match his words, not once in a while, but always. Because that consistency becomes a memory no one forgets. Women don't remember the man who played a role, who wore masks, who changed with the setting. They remember the one who was solid, authentic, unwavering, the man whose integrity was not a performance, but a way of life. And that is a legacy that never fades. At the end of the day, what makes someone unforgettable is not perfection, not charm, not money, not the things that fade with time. It is the way they showed up. It is the way they made you feel. It is the way their actions lined up with their words again and again until it became clear this is who they are, not just a role they play. Women never forget the man who was consistent, who protected without controlling, who respected independence, who listened with presence, and who lived with integrity. Because these things are rare enough to stand out, rare enough to leave a permanent mark, rare enough to be remembered for a lifetime. Think about it. Anyone can impress for a moment, but very few can create a lasting memory. Anyone can speak the right words, but not everyone can embody them. Anyone can demand attention, but not everyone earns respect. And respect, true respect, comes from character, not performance. That is why the man who lives by these values is unforgettable. He doesn't need to force himself into memory, because his impact writes itself into the heart of those around him. So the message is simple but powerful. Don't chase being memorable through things that fade. Be memorable through things that last. Be the man whose consistency creates trust. Be the man whose protection creates peace. Be the man whose respect fuels growth. Be the man whose presence makes people feel seen. Be the man whose integrity never wavers. Because when you live this way, you don't just pass through people's lives, you leave an imprint they carry with them forever. That is the kind of man who is never forgotten.